Dave Williams presents Conversations.Buzz.
It's great to see you again. It's been a long time.
Too. Dave, how long has it been? Longer than we want to remember. 20, 30 years? How long?
I believe that I started working, you hired me at KFWB around 2002. So it's been like 22 years.
I left in 2003 and came to New York.
2001, 2002.
Wow.
You were the program director and Andy Ludlam was the news director. And I was just, I really enjoyed working at that building. It was on Yucca in Hollywood. Did that building used to be an old Safeway or something?
I heard it was a supermarket. Yeah. An old supermarket. And it felt like it. That was a decrepit place. I once went into Master Control. I was talking to Bill Nesmith, our promotion imaging guy, our voice, and there's a column there, and I was talking to him. I kind of leaned on the column, put us off the air. Everybody comes running out, we're off the air. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I remember I hadn't been there too long, and I went to Roger. What was his name? Our general manager, Roger
Nadell.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Roger, if you're watching this. You're my Facebook friend. I should have remembered. But I went to him and I said, would it be okay if I come in here on Saturday with a vacuum cleaner and a dust rag and kind of go through the studio? Because I said, honestly, it is so dusty in there that I'm getting stuffed up and I'm getting He says, oh, no. You can't do that. You might knock a wire loose. And we don't have anybody who knows how this place is put together.
It's absolutely true. I remember underneath the booths, the anchor desks, you would, if you put your foot too far in, you could hit a wire. It would knock us off the air. Yeah, absolutely. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
One time I was in there with, I think it was Judy Ford.
Yeah.
I worked with her for a while in the morning. Loved her. Might have been Cindy. I don't remember, but what we were doing was we were taking turns, right? Being in the booth. We both co-anchors would be in together for a little bit, and then one of us would leave and start writing some headlines or something, and the other one would have 5 or 10 minutes alone. And I was in there by myself one morning, and all the power went out in the building. Boom, total darkness. And in that
because
building,
I leaned on a column.
Yeah, right. Darkness was dark, and it was, there were no windows.
No windows. Right.
So somebody brought me a flashlight. The thing is, the microphone was still working. We were still broadcasting in absolute pitch blackness. So I think one of the writers brought me a stack of copies somebody had actually printed out, which was my first lesson when, as we were moving into the computer age and everything we were reading was off the screen. It's like, you know what, maybe it'd be a good idea to print this stuff. Even
have a hard copy. Yep.
Yeah. All right, so we've prattled on here. Let me back up and get a little bit of your background so that people who don't know you know where you've been. And you have been around in the radio business and the news business.
I have. Let me just do a little quick, if I can't even remember.
Yeah.
Started out in television, fell into it kind of by accident at WCWB. We're broke, where cameras wobble badly. Channel 41 NBC in Macon, Georgia. A little less than a year, the CBS, the good station in town, WMAZ, hired me over. There I was a weather girl, and we didn't mind calling ourselves weather girls, and a news anchor. At WCWB, I'd been a street reporter and the weathercaster. About, I don't know, a year later, maybe a year and a half, I moved to Wichita, Kansas for the satellite news channel, SNC. And I was there for about 3 months when they promoted me to the broadcast side. That was NBC affiliate television in Wichita. There, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Then I moved to Atlanta. I landed at CNN, where I did some anchoring and writing and a little bit of producing. And then I moved out to LA. That's where I made the switch to radio. It's hard for me to actually believe this is true, but I was offered 3 different television stations, offered me positions if I would pretend to be Hispanic. At
Really?
that time, Los Angeles is 43% Hispanic,
Uh-huh.
and everybody was reaching for that. And the first one, I kind of laughed. Oh, I can't even roll my R's, haha. Went to the second one, and they did the same thing. And I said, they said at the time, my married name, I was married to my first husband, who is no longer in the picture, obviously, but they said, Quimby, huh? Well, what's your husband's last name? And I said, Smith. Went, oh, no, even worse. Christina Hernandez. I'm like, what? I just thought it was so weird. And I said, no, thank you. And then a third station did the same thing. So in the meantime, I took up per diem work at KNX, and I ended up becoming full-time there probably 5 years later. I was there for 10 years. I ended up being line editor. And then I went to Chicago for about a year and a half, and then KFWB came through with the news director job, which evolved into the news and program director job. Then I came to New York, where I anchored as a stopgap at 1010 Winds for, I don't know, 6 months or so. And then WCBS hired me as their program director. 4.5 years, 5 years later, CBS laid off half of its program directors. So I had to say bye-bye. Did a little stopgap anchoring at Fox News Radio. And then I got hired at Total Traffic, Metro Networks, running the traffic division of all things. I never claimed to be good with the roads and highways, etc. But I ran the traffic division for the tri-state and also with some duties nationally. And then I moved over to the news side, and we became affiliated with NBC News. We're NBC News Radio, iHeart. So I was a national director of broadcasting there, and that was until just a few years ago. And now I'm a very happy dog mom. I don't do much. So that's my rundown.
It's quite a history, and you moved up fast. You moved through it fast. Has news always been important to you, or is that just something you kind of fell into?
I absolutely fell into it. Let me just tell you real quick. I had a news director, the one in Wichita, told me never tell that story again to anyone. I had a full-time job in Macon, Georgia. And I thought, it'd be kind of fun to work in TV. Maybe they need a weekend receptionist. So I did a cold show up at Channel 41. And they said, well, we don't need a weekend receptionist, but the news director is auditioning right now for a contest girl. Why don't you go back and audition? And I did. And I'm going to say hi, Bill Kazarba, because I'll tell him to watch this. Bill was the first guy who brought me into news, and he hired me he brought me into television because he hired me as the contest girl. And then things changed there. He moved on. We got a new news director, and he made me a reporter. So, I'm sorry. In the meantime, the weather guy went on vacation, and they had me fill in, and the other guy got a job. So I ended up becoming the weathercaster, the weather girl. So Kazarba did get me into news in the beginning, I guess. So that's kind of how that happened. News. I didn't really study broadcasting. I mean, I'm sorry people might look down on that. Everybody who has their wonderful degrees in journalism. I took a couple of journalism classes, and that's it. But writing always came naturally to me. Performing, I'd been in plays, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of when I first started learning to anchor, I just thought, well, if I were an actress, how would I be an anchor? And that's what I did, and it worked.
You just said something that I have been telling people for years, and that is every once in a while, a program director would say to me, just in course of conversation, say, this new reporter we've got, I really like her. I think she's got a lot of ability, but she's tight, she's stiff. I can't figure out how to loosen her up and get her to be a real person. I said, you know what? We're in Hollywood. Get her a drama coach. Get her into an acting class. She doesn't have to go through the whole process of, doing plays and stuff, unless that's what she wants to do. But honest to God, that was my background. Theater was my background.
There you go.
And it gives you the sense of who you're trying to be, and how to do that without giving it a great deal of thought. And I think that's a wonderful piece of advice that nobody that I know has ever taken from me. But
well, I took it by accident, so it worked. Yeah.
Let me ask you about women in management positions in news and radio and broadcasting in general. And I thought, okay, I'll ask Chris about this. And then I'm going to be talking with Robin Bertolucci next week at
Oh,
KFI.
wow.
And
Hi, Robin.
and I've got a couple of other invitations out, so I'm going to make a series of. And then it occurred to me just this morning, I'm going, wait a minute, is this even an issue anymore? The idea of women in management, never mind in broadcasting, because I think it never really was, but you know, in any career field. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I have said this several times in the last few years. It's actually okay with me now to be growing old because of I landed in this career at the perfect time. I was a television news anchor at a time that they wanted young women to sit next to the established male anchors. So it was an issue back then. I was the first female accepted by the male anchor to co-anchor the 6 o'clock news in Wichita. He said no to everyone before me. So it was an issue for women.
Let me interrupt just for a second. And I would say this was, I'm guessing, but this was during the time too, when as a young woman on TV, that you were pretty well sure that you would never ascend to his position because they wouldn't let you get old enough. Is that right?
You know, that I never really thought that way, but I can see where you might think that, but
I mean, not now, but back in the day.
I know, but I'm thinking back then, and you know, there were some more mature established anchors in the 80s. This would be the 80s, early 90s. No, 80s that I was in radio, only TV, only in the 80s. And maybe, but you know, I never thought about it. I just never thought about it. But then when I got into radio and I got into radio management, once again, I never thought about being a woman. And there were women before me. Carol Shears had been news director at KFWB years before. She was an amazing person and one of my friends and mentors, and we miss her. I was really surprised, though. I got a phone call, and I never investigated to see if this was true. But Chris from The Wave gave me a call, and she said, hey, did you realize we're the only 2 female program directors with CBS? And at that time, there were something like 650 radio stations. And I was stunned. I mean, I just never thought about it. But I got into radio about the time that women were starting to get promoted into management. So it worked out perfectly for me. I've already forgotten your question, but you know, things have changed. And I think now, especially in my experience, one of the things that I did in my latest job, which was like 10 years, is I worked with other television and radio stations to help provide talent and product. And there were a lot of female news directors and program directors, and I'm trying to think if I knew any female general managers, a couple maybe. So it's still a little hard to get up to that level. If you'd want to, I never would want to. But yeah, it's interesting. Hopefully it's changed totally.
Well, as I said, I suddenly realized, I said, well, I'm not sure this is an issue. And the reason I said that's because my first woman program director was in the mid 80s at KFBK, Lucy Hamilton. And then my producer, Betsy Brazil, became news director, and then she became program director there at KFBK. And then, of course, there was you. And I'm leaving somebody out, Frida Ross.
I know Frida. At least I worked with Frida. I helped to provide talent for her.
Oh, did you? Yeah. She recently resigned from KLIF about the same time I did. So it really hasn't been a big issue in my own career. So I don't know why I'm even discussing the thing, except that I'm old.
I think, though, like I say, my timing for me personally was really good, because I think right before us, this was probably an issue. So it's an old issue, but yeah. Okay,
good. What do you think about news today in general? Social media influence in the way news is presented, and specifically with radio, if you can.
Wow. Well, you know, I'm a purist. I'm the 1010 wins, WCBS 880, KFWB, KNX 1070, WBBM. That's my background and that's my style. short, to the point, just the facts. Make sure you're right. Get it first. Get it right.
Yeah.
We don't really need that anymore. And I honestly have pulled away from listening and watching. It's not so much that I can get everything online. Have just kind of disconnected. Now that I don't have to see death and destruction everywhere, I prefer not to delve into it every day. I kind of try to keep up with the surface, but the younger generation. You're the one who put on Facebook, aren't you? How they the Lady Gaga song and the Madonna song, a game show where they knew the Lady Gaga song, but they didn't know Papa Don't Preach.
Oh, sure.
Everything is so different now that I can't relate. So maybe it is working for the younger people, but it's definitely not my cup of tea.
Right. Two things that you just said. Again, you're preaching to the choir, because when I retired from doing news shows, and I did news radio for 45 years. All those times I was, except for a brief period with you at KFWB, except for that, when I was doing middays, I was doing mornings the entire time for 45 years and getting up in the middle of the night, you know. And so but that was not the main issue. When I retired in October, I've just had enough. I don't want to talk or think about, you know, oh my God, another Trump Biden election. Are you kidding me? Have to go through that again? And then the local tragedies. You know, you try to tell people about a house fire or a shooting or something like that at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you look for ways to give people a smile, a reason to start their day kind of on a positive note. And I just had so much of it that at this point, I haven't listened or watched any news since I retired in October. And here we are toward the end of February.
You make me feel better about it, because actually I feel kind of guilty sometimes when I realize that I lapsed into not a news junkie, but I'm not.
Yeah. No, I understand completely. And then you said something else there that I was going to comment on, and I can't remember what it was. All right. Oh yeah, I do. You were talking about the old style, the straight, unbiased, get to the point, just tell the facts, don't offer any opinions. And you said we don't need that anymore. And I'm curious as to what you mean about that, because a lot of people will tell you, oh, we got to get back to unbiased reporting. And I agree with you. I think that it won't work.
Well, I don't think it'll work, but that's not what I meant by we don't need that anymore. What I meant is we don't need radio anymore. It kind of breaks my heart to say that. But we don't need it because we have everything everywhere else. Right on my watch, I can look and see what's going on, and I can get the weather and you know, it's so we don't really need it anymore. And that's why it has to be entertaining. We just have too many options nowadays. But the problem is that the people who don't know, who did not ascribe to, and we're not into the kind of news that you and I have given all of our lives, are going to believe this other baloney.
Right.
And there's too many people who cannot tell the difference in opinion, entertainment, and news. And that, you want to get me ruffled, we could talk about that stuff, because that is very upsetting to me. When I worked at CNN, it was news. We did news. It wasn't a political thing. So that upsets me, actually, that there's really no source other than radio. I will say this. We need radio for this reason. It is, in my opinion, the only still unbiased, straightforward news you can get. And that's all news radio.
I agree with you.
The top of the hour, drop-ins. But the news radio is the only place where I think it is still, for the most part, untainted.
I'll tell you what, I was thinking, like you were for a long time, that radio is coming to an end and there won't be any radio anymore, and we won't. But that was all thinking, watching the new technologies develop and so forth. Recently, I've been in conversations for this podcast with a couple of people who are very, very smart people. Tom Langmeyer, who ran WGN forever, and he's running a group now upstate I want to say upstate New York, it's the northeast anyway. And then there's another man whose name is going to escape me at the moment, and I just talked with him recently, so this is embarrassing, but he's right there in central Georgia, which is where you're from, and he's got a
Greg
group of,
Tano.
pardon me?
Greg Tano.
Well, no, he was a friend of Greg's, and Greg is the one that pointed me to him. Anyway, the point is that both of these guys have put together a small group of stations in small towns, in small markets, and they're going back to the old concept of serving the community locally, and the people who are on the air live there, and they talk to the local business people, and it's really kind of exciting. And I think
that makes me happy. Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way it's going to go. Let me talk to you for just a moment. Another issue that I'm kind of interested in is coaching, coaching talent, young talent, because I used to complain about it right up to the end. It's like, I've been in radio for a very long time, and the last time anybody gave me any kind of direction at all was David G. Hall at KNX, and that was 20 years ago. And the funny thing about that is that when I started the KFBK, he was a cub reporter, and then I became his boss, and so we went full circle. But honestly, I had some big time program directors who never told me a word about my performance, good, bad, or different.
Well, they should tell you when it's good, and if I didn't, I'm sorry, because the reason you weren't coached is because you did not need it. I mean, flat out, that's not flattery, that's truth. But somebody, including me, should have told you how good you were.
You did. You very often, you were before David Hall, so you were in that group that did help guide me. And you're right, giving people compliments and being specific about it is very helpful. I love the way you did that story when you said this or that and the other thing. But criticism as well is certainly needed by people who are young and just getting started. And I guess it's been a while since you've been in the position to coach those people.
Well, that was actually one of my joys and challenges. I was in a situation where I'm trying to find people all around the country, and I would often not have a lot of experienced talent to choose from. And I actually took great joy in coaching a young person to a point where a station said, okay, I'll take them. And I've had a number of people, established anchors, who have said to me, nobody's ever told me that before. So I did try to coach the people. And I had more than 100, 150, I don't know, anchors that I was responsible for in my last position. So it's hard to hear everybody. You have to wait for feedback from a station, which is tough. I would actually air check everybody, but to get through 100 people to air check takes a long time, so they didn't get it that often. But I tried to listen to people all along. I mean, there's little tiny things. I'm going to give a tip right now, just in case any young person is listening. One of the very first things to do to sound more conversational is get rid of a and the. Not the cat was stuck in the tree, the cat was stuck in the tree.
Yeah.
And that's a little tiny thing that when people would change that, it really makes a huge difference. Sorry.
Like a real person.
The teacher in me's coming out. I loved coaching people.
The last few years, I guess it was the entire time that I was working in Dallas with Amy Shadroff, who
Love Amy.
Yeah, you worked with her. She worked with you at KFWB before I got there. Anyway, I just stopped wearing headphones, except when we're going to be talking to somebody on the phone, and I have to be able to hear them with my mic open, or somebody in a different studio maybe. But otherwise, if we're just talking on the air, I take the headphones off, because listening to myself puts me in a bubble, completely apart from the real world and the conversation that we're having. Obviously, if you're reading, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but it does, because we tend to affect our voices. And that's what you're talking about with the over pronunciation or over enunciation stuff.
Yes.
It's kind of fun. The other part of it is, I used to tell program directors, by the way, who not criticize me or give me any kind of help. I say, you know what? I think either one of two things: either I am absolutely perfect, which is not likely, or I'm beyond help. So which is it?
Well, that's a tough one. Let's talk about that off air, okay?
Anyway, the other thing that I noticed that happened, and this may be for the same reasons, a matter of getting experience and getting comfortable in your position and so forth. But back in the early days of my career, and I suspect you have a similar sense. I used to talk with my coworkers, my colleagues, and we would talk about what we were doing, how we were doing it. We would ask each other for opinions on, a piece of copy or something, or how we delivered this. We would actually discuss the craft of radio a lot. When I was young, a radio station manager would throw me out after 12 hours, because that's the only place I wanted to be. So I'd go over to one of the other guys' house, and we sit around and talk about how to do this and how to be on radio. And the last 10 or 15 years, I couldn't find anybody who was even interested in improving their delivery or the way they approached doing things. I don't know.
Was that because you'd gotten to a point where all of your peers were experienced as you were, and they just did it and it just came naturally?
In some cases, I'm sure that's true, but in a lot of cases, no. Because Chris, in the last few years, I've seen people straight out of college, out of journalism school, go to work as reporters and even anchors at major market radio stations. First job out of the box.
Yeah.
Saw that a lot when I was in Chicago for a few months. So to me, it's like they're missing their basic training.
I totally agree, because like I say, when I became a news anchor, I was an actress, and I learned everything that I know. Well, I kind of knew the ethics. I don't know, to me that just came naturally, and I took a little journalism. But I used to see, when I first moved to Los Angeles in the mid 80s, I saw these beautiful young women anchoring in Los Angeles, and I just thought to myself, no, you're going to wash out. And they did. They just would disappear. Now, maybe they went back to a smaller market or something, but what kind of an ego hit is that? Yeah, I value coming up in the ranks. It made all the difference. But one of the things, my husband works for a network in New York, and he is appalled at the APs and the writers that they bring in. They don't know anything. They don't know anything. It's really sad.
Right.
It's sad.
Well, even the big journalism schools can only teach the basics at one level, and for a very brief period of time. You have to get those habits ingrained and all of that stuff. So I don't know. Do you miss it at all?
Well, that's part of all the change. That's part of all the change now, where grammar doesn't matter. And I don't. Terrible.
Do you miss working in the business?
No, I thought I would. I used to think for years, I thought, what am I going to do when I don't have this job?
Yeah.
I frankly worked too many hours for too long. I would do it all again, but I look back on it and I really did sacrifice a lot personally. But once again, I'm not complaining. I had a wonderful career and I would do it all again. I miss the people, and I'm very fortunate that people from Los Angeles, and especially more recently here in New York, hardly a day goes by that I don't hear from somebody that I've worked with, and that keeps me happy. But I don't miss working.
If I can, pay you an effusive compliment, you were special as a manager, as a colleague. You have the tremendous amount of self-confidence and the ability to be open and to look at people when they ask a tough question and say, I don't know.
I probably said that a lot.
There's a lot of people that can't seem to bring themselves to saying that, So you're inspirational. You're a great leader, and I consider you a good friend, and I appreciate very much the opportunity you gave me to work with you, and the opportunity to talk here. I like it. We're going to stay in touch.
Well, I'm very, very flattered and excited that you contacted me. This has been a lot of fun. And if you ever come back to do part 2s with people, I hope you call me.